Hi, everybody. My name is Virginia. I am delighted to be here today. It's been 6 years, actually, since I spent a year working in the Emirates in Dubai. So, many memories along memory lane. I used to be a finance lawyer for almost a decade. And then in 2013, I moved from London to China. I moved to London to China not to do women's work, but to advise on One Belt, One Road investments for Chinese state-owned enterprises and banks. And then what happened after that was an accident. One day at a party, I met a bunch of girls, and we had all read the book Lean In by Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg. We decided to form a small group of women, 10 professional women, and we met twice a month and discussed our professional and personal challenges. Then what happened is that we held our first public event and 100 people showed up on a Sunday afternoon. We started to ask the women around us what challenges they had, and many women were saying, okay, there was a lack of confidence, there was a lack of role models, and there was a lack of networks. And so we decided to, from a 10-person group, to build a social network which connect working women across China, which didn't really exist at the time. And 10 women became 100, 100 became 1,000. The community spread from Beijing to the first-tier cities of China, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen in the first year. It spread to the second-tier cities in the second year, and then the third-tier cities. We started with 2 university chapters in Beijing. It became 4, then 6, then 10, then 20, and now we have chapters across more than 20 cities and 100 universities in China. And so the turning point came in late 2015 when I heard Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, speak at the Guanghua School of Management in Beijing. And he said, women are leaders of the future because they care more for other people. And on that day, I quit my job. I took the leap. I was terrified. And I decided to build Lean in China full-time into what it is today. So that's part of the journey. And one of the big initiatives that we started, which has now gone international, was this thing called She Loves Tech. We wanted to do a small startup competition for women in technology and entrepreneurs in 2015. And in the very same story, everything in China kind of grows big. In the first
really
year,
the effect of Jack's words continues to inspire in a domino effect that goes on today, right?
hugely, absolutely, yeah.
I think we're going to have lots of questions to follow up on that chapter of your life. But can I move on to Abdullahi? I know you have a lot of banking experience. And I'm just wondering, from your point of view, from the banking industry, what are the challenges that you have noted for female entrepreneurs, perhaps when they come to ask for financing, setting up their businesses, etc.?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Coming from Kenya, representing Gulf African Bank, one of the biggest challenges that the women, especially in business, are facing. We're in a country where, and actually this is cutting across the African continent, and I'm sure definitely a lot of other countries in the globe will resonate with the same thing, is that women have been, not been in business because of a lot of things. From a cultural perspective, that has actually been prohibiting women to participate in the older days in doing business and enterprise. If you look at a country like Kenya, for example, we have about 7 to 8 million land ownerships documents that are actually out there in the country. Out of this, only 1%, actually slightly below 1%, are owned by women. So this has really been hindering them definitely from accessing financial, where they're required to bring some sort of security to access financial services. So it's one of actually also the prohibiting aspects where all the challenges women face in doing business. The other things has been definitely lack of access to information and of course financial services to be able to participate in general trade and do enterprise. A lot of actually Kenya, the government is one of the biggest people who are doing the economy who are doing business and through the tendering systems and everything. And the women have been missing out because of a lot of challenges. Lack of the expertise or the financial, knowledge to participate in a tender, filling the documents in terms of being able to fill a tender document also has been a challenge. Bookkeeping, history in terms of when you go to the financial institutions, you ask for, have you been in operations for the last 2 years, or what documents do you have to prove? So there are a lot of challenges from, financial literacy perspective, deliberate exclusion by the society in terms of from a cultural, historical perspective.
It's interesting because, of course, you're speaking of Kenya, but I think a lot of the issues that you're identifying can probably be translated into many other communities and jurisdictions globally. And they say that to find an answer, you need to know what the question is. So I think one step forward and a positive one is knowing that these are the challenges.
Sure.
I'll come back to you as to the solutions that you think that you have found as an institution. But I want to move on to Anu. Women Investing in Women, loving the name. Could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start it?
Absolutely. So my company originated actually in a Fulbright research project at the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai. And this was 10 years ago, and the study was on high-growth women entrepreneurs. Well, I got to India, and there was 20 high-growth women entrepreneurs in a country of 1.4 billion. Why is that? I wanted to know. And so we narrowed it down to 3 topics: access to capital, political regulatory issues, and global networks. And so my professor had indicated to me that we had 9 months to get this research, focus on one area, and we looked at access to capital. Well, what does that mean, access to capital for women entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, angel networks, private equity investors? And the study looked at where the capital was, and again, where it was going. So currently, $40 trillion worth of assets under management are controlled by women today. And by 2020, that number is going to increase another $30 trillion. And with the numbers that we're looking at for underutilized women, it could grow to even another $28 trillion. So how do we move that money into women's innovations, women-led funds, platforms focused on women, like crowdfunding platforms, blockchain platforms? There's a lot of money that we can control if we decided today to move it in the direction that's going to benefit other women. So given this understanding of what we control and the ability that we have to invest in causes that we care about, I thought we should create our own platform called Women Investing in Women. In order to do this, we have to shape our minds, and we have to start at a very young age looking at our girls. So we created the world's first radio and television network powered by millennial women called the State of Women Radio and Television Network. The hosts are between 16 and 23 years old. We have over 1 million followers on Facebook, 95% which are millennial. We have an aggregated reach of 115 million viewers across 50 content sharing partners. And what we're producing now during this forum and the forum at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in India last week is a global docuseries on women investors and entrepreneurs that's going to be showing over 2 billion viewers next International Women's Day. So the platform is really dedicated to you. It's by our women and girls for our women and girls.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
Did it surprise you, the traction that the platform attracted so quickly from inception?
It didn't surprise me because our core philosophy, our core mission, is something that I think many people support, and it's a communication tool that's been long awaited. And now that we have social media, it's an exponential way of communicating across borders. And I think women are naturally better communicators and networkers. So the word has spread quickly.
And Fahmi, you're sitting there quietly at the end. When I read your bio and I read the numbers, at 26, you set up your hedge fund. I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but that wasn't that long ago because you were 27 only recently. So what was it that pushed you to doing that? And what are those, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the challenges and the trigger points that got you to where you are today.
Sure. So it was a rather long-winded journey as far as creating Softcat, even though it happened in a short period of my lifespan. But you know, I was initially a mathematician, and the way that I see the world and the way that I approach problems has been through that mathematical lens. And then eventually I ended up in investment management. But when I was in the hedge fund industry and I was working at another fund, I was suffering from significant discrimination and harassment. But what I also saw was there were not many women role models around me. I really had to rely on a network of strong male mentors to get the support that I needed to feel comfortable in my industry and as far as building my skill set and expertise. So what Softcat Capital does, it's a business that I'm trying to build around what I love to do and what I'm incredibly good at. And the way that we invest is we look for bad behavior in public equity markets. So companies that are engaging in fraud, that are abusing the public, and that are ripping off consumers. And we try to do investigative work to then identify that fraud and bring these companies to justice. And that's how we invest. But as a woman, as a young woman, you know, a child of Bangladeshi Muslim immigrants, I was afforded a lot of opportunities in my life. I was in a position of power where I was able to leverage my expertise and my network in order to make the jump and start my own hedge fund. And I felt that it would have been a travesty to not just myself, but to all of those who've supported me and to all of the women that that looked up to me, for me not to make that jump. But it really, you know, when you get to that point where you really know what you love to do and you want to build a business around it, and you're also in an industry that's suffering from systemic issues related to gender disparity, then it's important to make that jump, and that's exactly what I did.
And you're doing it in New York?
Yes, in New York.
Bettina, some of our fellow panelists have identified the challenges that they face personally and observations that they have made, and I wonder perhaps if you can share with us what are the key challenges that you have noticed as well within the industry that you're focused on?
Okay, good afternoon. Yes, so I'm presenting Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, and we have a unique approach. We are a private business school and also an international advisory service. So when we look on the numbers, so we know still with all the financial inclusion activities, there's still a gender gap of 7%. If we look on banking services. And when we did our work in the field and also research, mainly women have really challenges simply to open accounts, to get certain banking services, because they may don't have the documentation, and specifically when we think about credit access to finance, as they have generally smaller businesses, banks still don't recognize them maybe as valuable customers and profitable customers. So women have really challenges to access credit specifically, and also very often they don't have the collateral requirements from the bank perspective. So besides that, we know also that women are not looking only for a product. So it's more that they look for solutions that help them as a holistic approach for their business, but also for their private, personal life. And I think that is what we have been learning, and also seeing it's very often combined also with their own attitude, as we have been hearing also, I think, in the morning in a session I participated. It's really women subestimate also their knowledge, and very often how they position themselves. They feel, oh, that's not for me. And I think these things combining show that it's very challenging still to get the right financial service they want or they are looking for in banks. And that means also from the bank perspective, once knowing that, and what we are trying to promote through our support is really that banks reframe their approach to women, and specifically to women in business.
It's a very good point, because we identified some of the issues. And I know, Abdullah, when you were talking earlier, you've noticed it, in your career some of the issues that women are faced security-wise, understanding the financial documents. You know, these are the raw tools that you need to take that first step into setting up your own businesses, for example. So then, if we know what the issues are, what are then the solutions that perhaps you have identified within your own institution or the banking industry generally to tailor products for women?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, the women entrepreneurs out there are facing a lot of challenges. And in line with the Global Development Goals, actually being one of the agendas for Agenda number 5 to empower and develop the women fraternity. As a country, the government has done some deliberate measures to make sure that they empower the women and bring them into the front. And the financial institutions have been a lot of the time shying away from dealing with them and giving them the necessary the capital financings and requirement. On top of the challenges, the social challenges that they're facing out there in terms of even getting the business and even starting up the business. So if I give you a scenario, in Kenya we have averagely about 7.8 million SMEs operating in the country. Of course, there are more in the informal, definitely sectors, but what has been documented so far is about 7.8 million SMEs. 40% of these are women-owned businesses, either in the medium-sized enterprises or in the low-end, informal sector. Now, they are unable to grow out of this because of a lot of things, the challenges that I've actually initially said. So as a bank, we saw, because being an SME bank, we saw an opportunity. 40% of 7.8 million businesses is not something you can just ignore. For you to grow, definitely, it's an easier market. It's a market that needs to, as a bank, we need to target. But of course, that it comes with its own challenges. You can't treat it like the normal, your normal day-to-day, business, man-dominated businesses that will provide you with all the securities that you need, will provide you with all the documentation that you need. So there has to be some exceptions that we need to do for us to be able to play in this front. So we partnered with the UN Women, I think about 2 years ago, where we said we need to do about 3 things for us to play in this market. One, we need to educate these women first. Educate them in terms of the basic running of the business, the basic financial management that needs to be done for any business to survive or to grow. Educate them in terms of how do they formalize their businesses, do the necessary registrations and everything.
And
so
sorry to interrupt you. So how,
yes.
when you say educate, these are seminars and workshops and...
Yes, we have been, we first established a unit within the bank that specifically deals with women banking, and we call it ANISA, with its own specific branches, dedicated branches for women, run by women or female employees of the bank, so that women actually feel a bit more easier to interact with them, go there for anything that they need, and be able to get the necessary help that they need. So we have been doing in those specific branches. We give them advisory services by our staff. With the UN Women, what we have been doing is we have been holding seminars in the major towns of the country, where we call all the women entrepreneurs and educate them on different themes. The theme, for example, for this year, we have done 3 conferences for them, and where we trained them was Women in Procurement, where we're saying, look, the government has the highest, business opportunity in the country, and is actually one of the largest spenders, individual spenders in the economy. And the government has done a deliberate effort, as I said earlier, to do about 30% of all public procurement to be given to disadvantaged groups. These are women, youth, and people with a disability. Okay. So now, when these people, the training was how can we help them be able to participate in this tendering process and take up the 30%. The biggest challenges, one was, the lack of understanding in terms of how to fill or how to apply even a tender. The basic things, how do you fill the documents? How do you apply the tender? What are the requirements? So these are some of the training that we have been doing them to do. Once they win the tender, again, the biggest problem also was delivery. You don't have the capacity you don't have the access to financial assistance from the financial institutions. Maybe you have not, this is the first time you're winning a tender. This is the first business probably you're doing as a woman. So we said, how can we be able to help them, these women be, for the ones who are in business, continue being in business, and for the one who's starting, come on board into business. So we did what we call an unsecured LPO financing for women, up to 20 million shillings. That's about $200,000, where we were giving any woman who gets any award or a tender from the government or any government institution will just walk into any of our branches and be able to be given financial support to execute or to implement that particular tender of up to about 200,000.
Fantastic way to attract women into it. And when did the initiative start?
We started the training last year in 2016, but now the LPO financing we started in March this year.
Okay.
From a book of zero, currently we have done so far, as at when I checked the data yesterday, about 800 million shillings in that specifically targeted women, and we're looking forward to grow this portfolio. Actually, it has become one of the very easy ways to grow our asset book as a bank, and because there are a lot of women who are out there who are doing this kind of tender, and they were initially not being able to do because of the restrictions. So once we opened this opportunity, it really gave us a lot of traction in building also our asset book as a bank.
There'll always be resistance to anything new because humans are creatures of habits and they don't like to change. So, but I wonder, moving from Kenya to China, because Abdullahi is describing a smart ecosystem. I think you probably agree, Virginia. Maybe let's talk about a smart ecosystem and how female entrepreneurs or female bankers, or the female community, the female business community, how they can benefit from smart ecosystems, and maybe in China, how is that different?
Sure. I think that the heart of Lean in China as a nonprofit women's development platform is actually the community. And the community is basically you all, people sitting right in front of me here today. I think we started off doing events, and then we started to realize that events were actually not enough, that you needed to build a whole ecosystem that supported women to lean in. For entrepreneurs, what we designed was this thing called She Loves Tech. We started off with a small startup competition in Beijing. Last year we went to 4 countries. This year we're in 8 countries. And the whole point was to start to create that ecosystem. Now, when I think of the ecosystem, first of all, you need to think about what female entrepreneurs lack. And when I think of what they lack, I think of 3 things. I think of, obviously, the lack of funding. So women, I think, receives something like 2% of total venture capital in the world. The second thing they lack is lack of networks. Okay, so lack of networks can mean lack of mentors. The lack of networks also means that it's harder for you to find clients. The third thing that entrepreneurs lack, I call it human capital. Finding the right people to hire, etc. And networks means, the number of VCs and funding you have access to as well. So it all leads to each other. So what we tried to create with She Loves Tech was obviously, first of all, a platform for the best female entrepreneurs using technology, in each of the cities where we held rounds. And one thing I noticed over the last 3 years is that after participating in a competition like that, the increased media exposure that they got meant that Forbes was easier, was easier for someone like Forbes to identify them as a promising entrepreneur in a certain field. The media attention also meant that very often after the competition or, during the process, they would, get funded as well because people would take notice. So I think that building a smart ecosystem means, first of all, I think, creating buzz around your startup, which is, through media. Creating of networks. So one of the things we did was we brought all the finalists from all the 8 international rounds to China. We gave them a week of boot camp. We gave them mentors to refine their pitch decks, because one thing I realized was that if you don't have a good pitch, then you have a great business and a great idea, but it's lost in your pitch. So we gave them mentors to refine their pitch decks. We gave them a whole boot camp of understanding the Chinese market. We had investor networking. And then on top of that, we had the finals where they pitch in front of another whole bunch of VCs. So I think that building that ecosystem means, paying attention to all 3 tenets. media attention, I think mentorship, and then the increased access to networks, which then also gets them funded. Because at the end of the day, in a venture world, many times it's about who you know and who you have access to. You need to create that noise, that buzz, so people sit up and take notice.
And learning from each other, right? In a network where you are encouraged to ask questions, I suppose, and that's part of the initiative that you're running. And Annie, can I just bounce that question off to you? I mean, what is the critical need for female entrepreneurs to obtain funding in the first place? Why is it important?
So women are traditionally underbanked, underfunded, underpaid, all of the above. So even if you're more resource efficient, even if you have a product that's gaining traction, if you have an investor that doesn't really understand how this is going to scale or can think beyond the stage you're in, it gets a little complicated. So there's this principle known as homophily, like invest in like. And if you don't understand it, you don't get it, you're likely not going to invest in it. And so the challenge with women entrepreneurs is if you believe in homophily, where where like invests in like, and if there's not as many women investors sitting on the other end of the table, you are challenged to begin with. And then if you're with someone that doesn't understand your market, you're challenged again. So like Virginia said, the number of women that are receiving venture capital today, it's minimal. Part of that is because VCs want to see traction. They want to see you have at least $1 million or more in revenue. And in some instances, they want to see more than $1 million in revenue. They're looking at your monthly revenues and they're looking at your annual revenues. And there are not that many women-led companies that reach that threshold. So that's a challenge. Why aren't they getting to that threshold? Part of it has to deal with networks. Part of it has to do with just the resources they've been given. So now you see many more initiatives and incentives for women to have their own pitch competitions, their own pitch sessions, their own conferences. And there was this question that was posed, like, is it really beneficial to have women-only conferences? And the argument is absolutely, because you need a champion that's in the boardroom that's going to take your deal forward. That's what's been missing, because there's so few women who are partners in venture capital funds. So that's detrimental to some reason, to some instances, where people that are on the investment committee don't really understand your business or your model. So I think that's been one of the challenges till now that we've seen. What's changing, I'll emphasize, is that now we have crowdfunding, and women are able to validate their products in a different way and say, look, this is how much traction I'm getting, this is how many customers I'm able to show. And they're able to participate at smaller tickets.
Yeah.
And so that's in a way to another way to validate, like, this is my business and this is my customer base. And so I think that the model is shifting slightly, but they're still smaller tickets. And like Virginia said, we do need more investors coming to the table to give these women entrepreneurs access to capital. Now, one of the things that I'm working on right now is how do we figure out a way to get women-led funds more access to capital, not just the entrepreneur, but also those women that want to start funds. How do they get access to those investors who want to put capital into their venture fund or their private equity fund? Because that same access to capital is all the way up the chain. So the more women that invest into funds, invest into women entrepreneurs, that's how you fix this system.
The domino effect, right? The ripples.
Oh yeah, it has to start from the top. Ultimately, ultra high net worth women who have that capability, it's not just about the philanthropy that you do, it's a lot more, your investment is going to make the difference in what kind of products you will see that will benefit you, your children, and your communities and your countries and this whole entire global economy. That's what we stand for.
Empowered women, empowering women.
Correct.
Right?
There you go.
Bettina, how would you judge progress towards gender equality in the workplace today? Looking at it from a holistical point of view.
Yeah, what we have, is it working? What we have been seeing is that as we are working mainly with financial institutions, and from what we heard also from women, specifically when we talk about women in business, is that they are really looking for access to information and knowledge, which was already shared from the other participants. And we have been developing a tool with EBRD to women help themselves assess their capacities in terms of how do I manage my human resources, how do I manage marketing and other different topics. And based on that, they get their own assessment, and we have been trying with the partnering banks and to really develop linkages to other areas where they can get mentoring, coaching for specific topics they need, as well as specific trainings. So that is specifically important for, I would say, more developed businesses, for women who have, let's say, small, medium-sized enterprises, to really have access and to develop further, as they will also, as we know, employ other people, and specifically women employer looking also forward to employ more women themselves.
So I know it's part of the initiatives and programs that you run at the Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
Is this one of the programs that you've introduced?
Yeah, so we have, at Frankfurt School, we have developed a whole program for women in business, which is based really on different components. So we have been implementing it right now with 22 banks in 9 countries. And it's composed of a combination. As we know that women just don't want one product, one investment. They want to have a whole package that serves them. So we have including in product development, financial products, but also non-financial services, what I was just mentioning, specific trainings, and also the banks, some of the best practices have shown on their websites. They build small knowledge information or linkages. And then we also do, when we start working with banks, as we strongly believe that training is key, not only for the clients, but also for the financial institutions. So we have developed a whole program for training from executive management on gender to generate the awareness what is different. Why do I have communicate differently to women than men, to make that clear, and only results can be really seen when we are sure that management from a top-down level really understands the difference. How do I communicate differently? How do I promote differently my services to women? As we believe the women market is not just a niche to serve, it's really an opportunity, what we have been hearing already today. So it's a complete approach with an assessment, product development, as I was mentioning, big training component, also for front office staff in gender training, sales, and relationship management, as women really want somebody to take care of them. It doesn't matter if they have a bigger business or smaller one, but they want to have just kind of one-stop person in a bank. And so we have been developing this, and also I think a third point, really to start looking into numbers. I mean, developing disaggregated numbers for gender within the financial institution to track and to create a business case to engage other politicians, other funds, and so on, for really moving forward with business.
And the engagement of communities is key for any progression in any jurisdiction going forward. I have a question that I want to ask all the panelists, but before I get there, Virginia, can I just come back to you? Because when we were discussing yesterday, we were talking about new asset classes. And gender lens investing is arguably a new asset class. In just a few words, can you just, because this is new and we love new things and we want to be ahead of the competition, so what is it?
Gender lens investing is a nascent concept. It's something which has come out of the US, actually, an American think tank called Criterion in the last couple of years. Now, gender lens investing means not just looking at female entrepreneurs, but actually looking at the value of women or gender throughout the entire value chain of investment. And I think the other two panelists here today have actually articulated that really, really well already. If, for example, if 40% of your consumers are actually, or SME businesses are women, then that's not a demographic you can actually ignore. So I think what it really means is that looking at the value of women, not just as entrepreneurs or CEOs, looking at them as users, as consumers, as agents, as employees, as suppliers, etc. And I think women control, I think, something like 75 to 80% of consumption power in the world. I think that figure is something like $18 trillion in the world. In China, we call it the rise of the she economy. I think in China alone, that figure is estimated to be $4 trillion by 2020. And what the data shows us is that women consumers are actually driving growth in startup companies, especially in the internet, mobile, and social media businesses, regardless of whether these businesses are female-orientated or not. So like what the other two panelists say, this is not about, gender lens investing is not about, okay, we're investing in women because it's great social impact or because it's morally good. It's because it is an economic opportunity. And if a business, for example, takes into account, the women demographic, whether it's consumers or, in terms of founders, it should actually give itself a strategic advantage. So while building a gender lens fund, we should be looking basically at companies which use or leverage on the power of women throughout the entire value chain.
Right, so from a bird's eye point of view and taking a 360-degree look at everything. At this point, can I invite members of the audience to share any comments, feedback, their experiences or questions that they have for the panel, maybe? Then if I can return to the panel, and if I could all ask you, for members of the audience that are looking to enter the finance market or set up their first business, what would be your takeaway words for them? And I want to start with Fahmi first, because I know you are very much inspired, and networking and mentoring is something that's very key to your heart. So perhaps if you can kick off, and then we'll go for Virginia and move on.
Sure. I think in investing, risk is so important because with greater risk, there's typically greater reward. And women, speaking from experience, are generally risk averse. We tend to want to know every single detail. We want every single data point. We want to map out every single scenario when we make decisions. But when you're starting your own business, you have to take a leap of faith. You won't know everything. There's going to be a degree of uncertainty, but in some ways, being able to take that leap is going to lead to a more successful business because more is on the line. But in order for women to be comfortable with taking on that risk, we need to rise up, and that's men, that's women, that's those of us in power with the ability to support other women, to actually mentor and support young women who want to invest. And that doesn't just mean telling them what to do in investing, but that also means showing them how do you live your lives while also living out a very high-powered sort of job. And how do you balance that? Because there aren't enough women entrepreneurs, certainly not in finance, and there aren't necessarily those role models today. So we need to be able to take a leap of faith. I certainly did in order to understand that I can accomplish this. And to that point, the other issue with women in investing just more generally is that women live longer than men, and typically caregiving responsibilities are in the hands of women. Yet women typically don't have investing responsibilities. Women at large need to be given more tools, and the financial sector, banks all need to rally around women because there is a monetary opportunity here to support women in their wealth management because in the end, investing in women is investing in the world.
Excellent. Virginia, you started our panel discussion quoting Jack. So we know that's an inspiration, but we want your own words to inspire us.
Actually, before I give my own words, just because I loved what she said, I wanted to say something which, again, Jack actually said at his conference this year on the bit about why banks should rally around women. So the financial arm of Alibaba is called Alipay. And it's poised, it's 550 million users. It's a fintech platform. And what he said this year at his conference was that Alipay should actually want to start paying more attention to women consumers. And the reason for that is because they pay faster and the repayment rates are better. So they see it as an economic opportunity. And as for what I want to give the audience, keep it short and sweet.
Yeah.
I think I never thought in my life I would be an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur, and I definitely did not think I would ever be in China. I saw myself as a professional, and I thought that was going to be my life. And I think that when I took the leap of faith, there was so much fear associated with it. And I think it's learning to, whether you say living with uncertainty or accepting that fear is natural and learning to live with it. And I think that, as an entrepreneur, you have to live with fear every day and let fear be your friend.
Thank you. Annie,
This is advice to women entrepreneurs?
what inspired you, and what would you say to those being inspired by you today? What are the words that you would leave with them?
So imagine what the world would look like if all of you made a commitment to invest in other women. And I mean that with your wallets. It's the underbanked, the underpaid, the underserved. You're giving them a chance. I have a 7-year-old daughter, Arya Satara, and what inspires me is to make this world a better place for her. And she's been with this movement since inception. She was in my womb when I started Women Investing in Women, so I sometimes say this is her twin sister. and I think of what the world looks like, the role models that she's going to have through all our videos, our podcasts. She started podcasting when she was 2.5 years old. I would include her in the interviews. My first podcaster host was my babysitter. My nanny was my producer. And we would call the Emirates, and we would call Sweden, and we would call Saudi Arabia and do Skype interviews, and that's how the content was made. It was an organic production. At the end of the day, I would look in her eyes, and she would look at me, and I'd say, this is for you. It's not just for you, it's for all the other little girls around the world that need role models. And each one of us has touched upon this today, saying we need more role models. Well, where are we going to find them? I'm going to look every corner of the world to find them. And I'm going to share them across my social media platforms, across my audio platforms, video platforms. So what inspires me really is you. It's your daughters, it's your sisters, it's your mothers. And I want to share them with the rest of the world. So please invest in other women, and let's make this a better world for all of us.
Beautiful. Really well said. Thank you. Abdullahi? No pressure to follow up with that.
I think, especially from the African continent, the women play a very critical role in developing the society. From back in the house, making sure that the kids have gone to school and all the way. So we usually refer them as the backbone of the society. And investing in them and making sure that they are and doing better and becoming more and more, unlocking for them more opportunities, especially from a financial banking, service perspective. The small things will make the difference. As I gave you the story of the bank, the Alpha African Bank, these are the small things that we need to make sure that to make sure that the women out there are more empowered. As we unlock the opportunity and the potential, we are developing the society in general. Because if you look today, the people who are left behind to make sure that the families are coming up and to make sure that the kids are coming up and the society is becoming better are the women and the ladies out there. So helping them and making sure that they participate and they are empowered to do, and run their own enterprises and participate in all aspects of the economy, I think it's something that will definitely add value, not only to the individual woman, but to the society in general. So to the financial sector. I think it's a time we need to look at the women entrepreneurs differently. Because one thing we realize, from our dealings with them, they are one of the most loyal customers we have are the women customers. With the lowest NPLs or default rates in the bank. So this shows you that they are not people who are just doing things, but they are committed to whatever they're doing. So investing in them, I think it's worth our while as well, yeah.
And ultimately, the international community benefits.
Yes.
Bettina, final words. Your advice to those inspiring to go into business or enter any particular industry today, what would they be?
I think from my experience or what I have seen and learned, I think it just starts everything with being aware what are the difference between women and men, how they see things, how they behave, how you have to communicate, because it's not having something totally different as we know for women. They don't want that. They don't want that, what we call so much pink market and things like that. They just want to be recognized as a person, as an entrepreneur. And I think for each of us, it starts with being aware of that gender differences. And I think that is all that discussion about and where the whole development, the ideas are coming from.
I would probably just add to everything that everybody says. And each person is a mentor because every single person has gone on a journey and every journey is inspiring. So when you walk into a room where you see faces that you've never met before, be ready to go on a journey with that particular person and be inspired by them. With those words, on behalf of everyone here on this panel, thank you all so much for attending. I believe this is the last panel for today. So enjoy your evenings, and we're here if you have any questions. Thank you.